He could no longer stand up on his own. He just howled. First at night, then during the day. His body creaked like rotten wood. Servants lifted him up, new ones every day. The old ones refused to return. The bedroom was filled with a sour, sweetish, rotten smell that did not disappear even after all the linen had been boiled in ashes. Doctors called it the smell of a ruptured intestine. Cooks called it the smell of the end. It was January 1547. London was frozen and silent. In the chambers of Hampton Court Palace, the windows were plugged with woolen pillows to keep the draught from reaching the monarch. But the king was still shivering, not from the cold, but from the pain. Dry boards crackled in the fireplaces. Next to the bed was a wooden tub of hot water in which his feet were soaking, swollen, cracked, and festering. One of the court physicians, Thomas Wenner, wrote, "On the shin of the left leg is an open ulcer the diameter of a palm. It oozes pus with whitish threads, possibly necrotic tissue. The skin around the ulcer is blackened. On palpation, there is a strong putrid odor." The servants were changed twice a day. Every evening, the court physician recommended a new remedy: wine compresses, a salve made of lard and onions, opium, leeches. Sometimes he recommended praying aloud. None of this helped. Professor Lewis of Oxford, admitted to the bedside on the personal orders of the Archbishop, concluded, "The leg is rotting from the inside. This is the first time I have seen flesh continue to disintegrate in the absence of bleeding. This is internal decay. The liver is releasing toxins into the blood, and the body is destroying itself in reverse, from the extremities to the brain." He was not allowed to see him the next day. Henry would not allow anyone to see him, not even his sixth wife, Catherine Parr. When she tried to enter, he shouted, "I am not dead, but I do not want to be buried with my eyes open." After that, he ordered the locks to be changed. Only 3 people were allowed into the room: the royal physician, the confessional priest, and the captain of the guard. All of them signed a pledge of silence. But the silence did not last. In early February, rumors began to spread through the corridors. The king could not walk. He screamed at night. His skin was peeling off, and blood was coming out of his mouth. One of the valets, dismissed for violating the code of silence, later testified under oath. His fingers would not straighten. There were black cracks under his fingernails. I saw his maid washing him. She vomited into the basin. He laughed. Then he cried. Then he asked to have his feet cut off. Archbishop Cranmer sent an ink-stained message from Canterbury Cathedral offering to perform the rites of confession and anointing. The response was silence. Later, Cranmer wrote in his personal book, "If he dies without purification, the people will see it as a sign." In mid-February, the situation changed. The king began to lose consciousness. The first to notice this was the equerry, who heard incoherent whispers in response to his morning greeting. Servants testified. He looked toward the fireplace and repeated, "I sit in darkness, but I hear the fire. It speaks to me." Doctors diagnosed blood poisoning. His temperature rose to 41 degrees Celsius. Hallucinations began. He shouted at his dead brothers. He said he saw Edward VI, although he was alive and under guard. One evening, according to a priest, he ordered a sword to be brought to him and repeated that he would go and fight for the throne. He had to be tied up. Under the guise of a procedure, he was bound with silk ribbons so as not to cause rumors, but his hands were breaking free and his skin was cracking. His skin was cracked like parchment, with protruding ulcers and a smell stronger than the sweaty skin of a dying animal. This was written in a report by the French emissary Blanche, who was allowed to hear but not see the king through a curtain. He added, "I heard him beg for forgiveness, and then I heard him laugh, call his dog, and order all the Flemings to be burned." Inside, in the chambers, it was even worse. Mattresses were taken out every 3 days. Sheets were burned. The floor was washed with vinegar. Servants wore scarves soaked in mint and salt. Several servants fell ill. One died. The court physician ordered an autopsy. The report stated, yellow fluid in the lungs, dark blood. The spleen is damaged, signs of internal poisoning. This caused panic, a conspiracy, poison, infection. Access to the body was completely restricted. But the most important thing was happening in the monarch's head. He was frightened by the smell. He called it the voice of hell. He repeated that he did not want to hear the song of his skin. Every evening he ordered a censer to be brought, but it did not help. The court priest's diary says, he is not afraid of pain. He is afraid of what he sees when he closes his eyes. The Queen wrote no more. Catherine's brother, William Parr, was summoned to deliver her personal instructions, but he was not allowed in. This gave rise to rumors of a last-minute change to the will. The courtiers were divided into two camps. Some, including the Duke of Norfolk and the Bishop of Winchester, wanted to preserve Catholic influence. Others, including the Seymours, promoted Protestantism. Secret meetings began in hidden rooms. Documents were sealed, letters were prepared, and the king was dying. By the morning of February 23rd, his eyes would not open. He breathed with difficulty, convulsively, with pauses. His mouth remained half open. Saliva mixed with pus dripped from his lips. He no longer ate. Attempts to pour broth through a cloth caused spasms. A dark substance with the smell of rancid fat flowed from his anus. When his underwear was removed, it was found to be stuck to his skin and had to be removed along with sections of the epidermis. The body began to accumulate fluid. The face was swollen. The eyelids were swollen. The wrists and knees became immobile. In a court note from that day, physician John Chambers wrote, "Putrefactive decomposition began during life. This is not sepsis. This is the collapse of the entire organism. The urine is black. The skin is turning blue. The nails have come away." He was not awakened. He moaned, whispered incoherent prayers, and then began to shout orders as if in a delirium. Several times he called out to his dead mother. Once he called out to Anne Boleyn. They brought him a crucifix. He turned his face away, but he ordered that it be hung at the head of his bed. A day later, they were told to take it down. A day later, they were told to hang it up again. This was repeated several times. The court scribe Marshall noted, "There was no peace in any of his gestures. He was restless even when he was still. He wanted to purify himself, but he was afraid of the consequences. He wanted to repent, but he was afraid that God was already listening." A secret note made by the valet during those days. "His breath seems to come from his bones. It's as if everything inside him has rotted away, and only something that makes a sound remains." Several times the rest of us heard a crackling sound in his chest, as if boards were breaking. The same valet was found dead 2 days later. He had hanged himself. A note found under his body read, "He is alive, but worse than dead." Meanwhile, in the outer halls, a redistribution of power was already taking place. William Page, the personal secretary, handed over the monarch's personal notes to Seymour. Lord Duke Somerset kept the guards under double lock. Duke Norfolk was arrested. His son, Thomas Howard, was imprisoned in the Tower. At the same time, the so-called New Will was being prepared. But no one could get a signature. The king's hand could not hold a pen. It was decided to use a stamp. When Archbishop Cranmer finally arrived, he was not allowed in immediately. He was refused 3 times. Only on the 4th day, when the king began to wheeze like a suffocating animal, was he allowed to enter. According to the report, he could not speak. He only moved his lips. I asked him if he believed in salvation, and he raised his hand with difficulty. One finger trembled. I took this as a sign of consent. 2 hours later, Cranmer was led out. Preparations for death began in the palace. Servants were given order to secretly move the body. The sheets were replaced with ceremonial ones. A cross was placed on his chest, but the king did not die. The day dragged on. The smell became unbearable. People fainted at the doors. Fluid oozed from the seams of his clothes. His head continued to swell, his eyelids no longer closed. One of the last reports made by the guards reads, "I saw a white worm crawl out of his ear. It fell on the pillow and moved. Then another one. I turned away." Despite all this, death didn't come. His heart was beating, his lungs were working. Father Giles, who entered to pray, later wrote, "This is how saints die, but he died like a man condemned. It was worse than fire, worse than torture. He was not killed, he was slowly left to die." Meanwhile, throughout England, preparations were underway for a change of power. The city of London increased its guard. The army was ordered to go on alert. The Seymours spread rumors of an impending transformation. Catholics strengthened their positions in cathedrals. In some counties, public prayers were read for the health of the monarch, although no one believed in his recovery. In the bedroom itself, preparations began for the transport of the body. A coffin was made in advance. It was covered with black cloth, and the inside was lined with wax and clay. But a problem arose. The king was too large and too swollen. The doctor recommended an autopsy immediately after death to avoid tissue rupture during transport. This caused a dispute between the clergy and the rulers. Could the body of a saint who had not yet been declared holy be autopsied, and the body was still breathing? On the night of February 27th, a severe attack was recorded. The servant on duty at the bedside cried out. Dark foam poured from the monarch's mouth. He raised himself up for the first time in 2 days and cried out, "Don't burn me, don't burn me," then went limp. For the next 2 hours, his heart continued to beat, irregularly, with interruptions. His face darkened. The ulcers burst open. His left eye leaked out. Blood began to ooze from his nose and ears. According to the captain of the guard, he was disappearing from the inside. It did not look like death. It looked like the disintegration of a human being. At dawn, silence fell. The official announcement was postponed for 2 days to complete the transfer of power and remove witnesses. The body lay in the hall for 3 hours. After death, fermentation began. A black liquid oozed from under his back. The pillow became damp and was thrown into the garden outside the courtyard. His eyes were open but cloudy. His tongue was black. His stomach was swollen. Darkness seeped through the thin fabric. No one dared touch the body until 3 people arrived: the court physician, the chaplain, and the estate manager. All 3 stood at a distance. The smell was excruciating. The stone walls of the room didn't protect against the stench. The doors were kept ajar, but the draft only spread the rot throughout the floor. According to the report of the captain of the internal guard, it was impossible to stay nearby. We tied a juniper broom over the door. It was useless. The court laundress later stated during questioning, "The clothes on his body were burning with red flames. I saw them smoking as if they were alive." Contrary to tradition, an autopsy was performed 8 hours after death. The court physician, old and mute with horror, merely nodded when the undertakers began to remove the cover. Leather gloves were used, but they were soaked through in 10 minutes. Gas escaped from her abdomen. There was a pop, and the whole room was filled with a foul odor. One of the assistants fainted, another ran out and did not return. All of her internal organs were found to be rotting. Her liver was loose, with signs of necrosis. Her stomach had ruptured from the pressure. The heart had dark streaks and brown growths. The bladder had burst. The lungs were torn, as if from an internal explosion. The intestines were blackened. One of the clerks later wrote, "This is not how a human being rots, but an animal, and not even that quickly." Outside, beyond the palace walls, no one knew yet. The announcement was scheduled for the morning of March 2nd. All this time, the body lay in a closed hall under guard. Access was by subscription only. Servants who whispered or prayed without permission were dismissed. The rooms were ventilated through open windows covered with cloth. The floors were washed with wine vinegar. Exclamations were forbidden. Only silence. When rumors finally leaked out, unrest began. Secret meetings were held in Windsor. At St. Albans Abbey, the first prayer for the great departed was read, without mentioning his name. A rumor spread throughout London. The king was not dead, but his body was no longer alive. Some whispered that he had become unclean. Others said that he was tormented by hell while still alive and would live forever. A rag doll with a crown was burned outside the courthouse. The court prepared to remove the body. Embalming was not possible. The internal decomposition was too advanced. Only the outside was covered with wax-soaked wool, bandages, and a reinforced sarcophagus. They could not carry the body out of the chambers immediately. It would not fit through the doorway. Part of the wall had to be dismantled. Everything happened at night, in complete silence, by lamplight. Lord Herbert's note states, "The body was carried by 6 men, but they carried it as if it were a leper. No one looked down. They did not show his face. Everyone was afraid, even the guards." When the coffin was carried out into the courtyard, the horses balked. One reared up, another pulled on the reins. The team had to be changed. The coffin was closed and sealed with wax bearing the coat of arms. The procession was short, 3 dozen people in black, with cloths over their faces. People stood silently in the streets. Some fell to their knees, but there was not a single cry, not a single prayer, only the creaking of wheels. One child cried out, "Mama, is it the king's death?" and was slapped across the cheek. The body was taken to Windsor. It lay in St. George's Chapel for 8 hours. Only bishops were allowed inside. The people were not allowed to enter. The smell was still there. They were afraid of leaks. Priest Foster wrote in his diary, "We did not bury a king, but a disgrace. No one looked at his face. It was shriveled, purple, with an open mouth. It did not look like a human being." The funeral took place without a salute, without singing, only a reading from a psalm. Silence hung over the coffin. Only when they began to lower it into the ground did the choir begin to sing, but not according to the rules. They say that one of the singers began to sing an old song about the Old Testament punishment. He was dismissed. No one recorded the words. That same evening, a manifesto was read. The throne passed to Edward. A new era began, but silence reigned throughout the country. The king was not buried as a ruler, but as a cursed man. 2 days after the burial in Windsor, local monks reported strange occurrences. The ground above the grave was cracking. A black stripe appeared where the coffin had been lowered, resembling a trail of burnt fabric. The church smelled not of decay, but of iron and smoke. One of the novices complained of a burning sensation in his eyes. He was taken away and never seen again. On the 3rd day, the bishop sent a confidential report to the Lord Protector's office. "The ground at the burial site is not holding its shape. We cannot hold services. People are refusing to enter the chapel." The architects who arrived confirmed that the masonry had been deformed. The ground had subsided. The reason was unknown. Meanwhile, a new wave of rumors began in London. It was said that the king's body had not been buried, but hidden. Servants who knew the details of the removal of the body suddenly disappeared. 2 left the country. 1 was found dead in the Thames. The guards conducted secret interrogations. According to one of the reports recorded in the Tower archives, the king was not dead. He was squeezed out of his body, and now the body is rotting, but the voice remains. That same summer, the bishops began a campaign to rewrite the eulogies. All references to great, indomitable, and divine were to be replaced with lawful, prudent, and consistent. Statues in cathedrals were partially removed. Portraits were hung in closed rooms. In Canterbury, the old panegyric Chronicle was burned. The order came from the council. The old Lord Marshal wrote in a private letter, "We buried fear. We buried greatness that was rotting from within. And now that the body is in the ground, Its spirit hangs over us. He did not sign the letter. A week later, he died without any signs of illness. He simply stopped breathing. Witnesses claimed that his mouth smelled of vinegar and wet dust. Chronicles report that in August, an epidemic broke out among the soldiers guarding the royal chambers. Symptoms included fever, loss of vision, and purulent ulcers on the neck and wrists. 3 died, 2 went mad. 1 threw himself out of a window. The report states, "They claimed to see the face of the dead king in the window without skin." A monastery manuscript from Westminster quotes a conversation between 2 brothers. "He is not dead. He has simply become someone else. His fear has seeped into the walls. His flesh remains here. We breathe him." The document was confiscated. The author later disappeared. The political reaction was twofold. On the one hand, there was harsh stabilization. Potential conspirators were arrested, and the ranks of the nobility were purged. On the other hand, there was a strange silence in speeches and documents. Henry's name was hardly mentioned. The new court avoided any allusions to the body, death, or illness. It seemed as if he had simply disappeared, dissolved. But the people knew. The name was not spoken among the people. They said, "He, the previous one, the one who thundered." Legends began to appear in folklore about a king who could not die until he confessed his own guilt, about a king whose flesh lived in the earth and ruined the harvest, about chambers from which a voice could be heard at night repeating the names of servants. In Norfolk, in one village, a barn was burned down because people claimed to have heard footsteps without a body. According to an elderly witness, they were heavy, damp sounds, as if something without bones was walking on straw. People began to place bunches of garlic and chalk above their doors, not like witches, like the king. Later, the Bishop of Chester would write in his report, "The decay of the body became an image of power. The way he died is an example for those who want eternity. He wanted to stay, but he didn't know the price. Now his death lives on in us." Historians still argue about what happened in Henry's last days. And was it physical punishment for his pride, or the natural decay of a ruler whose body could no longer withstand his own power? Doctors point out that he had gangrene, gout, ulcers, heart damage, dropsy, and kidney failure. But none of the conclusions explain why the corpse continued to rot as if it were alive. According to legend, soil was later taken from his grave to ward off evil spirits. But this soil itself ceased to hold roots. In Windsor, there is still a room where even moss does not grow. It has been locked up. Above it is a plaque with the inscription, "Do not touch this place. This is how Henry VIII died." This is how a fear was born that was unknown even during his lifetime.